Try reaching into your pocket right now, or close your eyes and imagine a thin piece of polymer paper or a cold metallic coin resting in the palm of your hand. It is weightless, inedible, unwearable, and completely useless as a weapon against wild beasts. Yet strangely, for that very piece of paper or coin, humans will trade their sweat, labor, and even their blood and lives. What transformed an intrinsically worthless object into the ultimate power governing the entire human world? The quest to discover the origins of money is not merely a tale of finance or commerce. It is a journey deep into the most mysterious layers of human psychology, an archaeological excavation of the greatest collective illusion humanity has ever created. To answer when humans first began using money, we must step back through the mists of tens of thousands of years of history, returning to those pitch-black nights when the first footprints of Homo sapiens had barely faded from the earth. For decades, introductory economics textbooks have told us a very logical fairy tale. Once upon a time, humans lived by bartering goods for goods. A fisherman had too much fish but lacked wheat, while a farmer had surplus wheat but craved fish. They would meet, negotiate, and swap. But gradually, this system became inconvenient due to the double coincidence of wants. The farmer on a given day might not want fish. He might want a stone axe instead. This deadlock forced humans to find a universal medium of exchange as a common measure, and thus, money was born. It sounds like a perfect, reasonable, and intuitive story. However, from the perspective of modern anthropology and archaeology, that story is almost pure fiction. Renowned anthropologist David Graeber, after researching thousands of historical documents and primitive tribes, affirmed that no society has ever operated purely on a barter system, as classical economics describes. So, before money existed, how did primitive humans trade and survive? The answer lies in two concepts: memory and trust. Imagine hunter-gatherer communities living roughly 30,000 years ago. In these small tribes of a few dozen to a few hundred individuals, everyone knew each other well. If you were a skilled hunter and brought home a large deer, you wouldn't barter it for a few cassava roots from your neighbor according to a fixed ratio. You shared the meat with the entire tribe. That was not pure altruism, but a systematic survival mechanism. Giving today was a way of depositing value into the community. Inside every member's brain was an invisible ledger. They remembered that you fed them, and when you faced risks, illness, or an unsuccessful hunt, the community repaid you with other meals. Originally, money was not physical. It existed as a network of social obligations and mutual trust. The pivotal breakthrough erupted when the agricultural revolution took place around 10,000 BCE. Humans abandoned the nomadic lifestyle, set up camp, and domesticated crops and animals. Densely populated settlements emerged, growing into the first cities along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in ancient Mesopotamia. As communities expanded beyond a few hundred people, the human brain could no longer hold that invisible mental ledger. You could not remember the faces and trustworthiness of thousands of strangers in a city. The network of personal obligations collapsed, and that was precisely when money was about to cry its way into the world. But its first incarnation might surprise you. Money was born not as glittering metal coins, but as squiggly lines etched onto clay tablets. Travel back in time to around 3000 BCE in the ancient Sumerian civilization. Archaeologists have excavated tens of thousands of baked clay tablets bearing cuneiform script. When deciphering humanity's oldest writings, scientists were startled to realize that the first things humans recorded were not poetry, philosophy, or heroic chronicles, but accounting ledgers. These clay tablets recorded precisely who deposited how much barley into the temple, and who owed the temple how many units of assets. Here, the Sumerians created the first recorded monetary unit in history, the shekel. But the shekel at this time was not a coin. It was a unit of weight, equivalent to roughly 11 grams of barley. The Sumerian temple operated like a centralized bank and a massive distribution center. Citizens brought agricultural produce to deposit, and priests recorded it on clay tablets. Barley became commodity money. You could use a set amount of barley to pay debts, hire laborers, or purchase land. But barley had a fatal flaw. It was bulky, perishable, and vulnerable to rodents. Clearly, humanity needed something more durable and easily storable to represent value. And from the darkness of ancient mines, metal began to speak. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, silver began to be used alongside barley. Silver did not rot. It was rare and easily divisible. People cast silver into ingots, bracelets, or irregularly shaped lumps. When a large purchase was made, they would cut off a piece of silver and place it on a scale. The shekel unit evolved from the weight of a handful of barley into the weight of an equivalent amount of silver. However, this was still not the fully realized coin we know today. Having to pull out a scale every time a transaction occurred, and even testing the purity of the silver to prevent adulteration, posed massive obstacles to trade. The mystery of money still awaited one final catalyst to complete its form. Parallel to the historical currents in the Middle East, along the warm coastal waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, another strange phenomenon was unfolding. Humans discovered a miraculous natural currency: cowrie shells. These small, glossy shells, shaped remarkably like molar teeth, became the most widespread and longest-lasting currency in human history. From ancient China and India, across Africa, to Oceania, cowrie shells were accepted as a universal medium of payment. Why shells? Because they were extremely durable, lightweight, easy to transport, impossible to counterfeit at the time, and most importantly, scarce in inland regions. A merchant in inland China willing to trade precious silk for a few shells harvested from distant South Asian seas proved a ruthless yet beautiful rule of money. An object's value does not reside in its practical utility, but in the collective belief of a community that it holds value. However, shells or unminted silver ingots still lacked a vital element to ignite a global commercial revolution: the guarantee of state authority. This brings our story to the land of Lydia, a prosperous ancient kingdom located in Western Asia Minor, in what is now Turkey, around 600 BCE. Lydia possessed rushing rivers carrying metal-rich silt, particularly electrum, a stunning natural alloy of gold and silver. It was here that King Alyattes, and later his famously wealthy son, King Croesus, made a decision that permanently altered the course of human history. They decided that citizens should no longer weigh metal for every transaction. The royal government minted pieces of electrum metal of precise weight and purity, then struck them firmly with a steel die. That stamp often bore the image of a roaring lion, the symbol of Lydian royal power. That was the exact moment the world's first official coin was born. Pause for a moment and reflect on the magical power of that lion seal. Once stamped, the piece of metal was no longer merely a few grams of gold mixed with silver. That seal was a pledge, a royal decree. I, the King of Lydia, guarantee that this piece of metal is of true quality and weight. Anyone who rejects it defies my authority. For the first time in history, trust shifted from personal relationships or self-weighing gold to the majesty of the state apparatus. Stamped coinage completely eliminated verification costs in trade. Commerce erupted like a wildfire on dry grassland. That fire swiftly spread to the ancient Greek city-states. The Greeks embraced coins with astonishing enthusiasm. The city-state of Athens minted the famous owl coin, bearing the image of an owl, the symbol of Athena, goddess of wisdom. The Athenian owl became the first international currency, circulating throughout the Mediterranean. Coins were not merely economic tools. They became the most potent political propaganda machine. When Alexander the Great conquered the world, he minted millions of coins bearing his own portrait, scattering them to every corner of his empire, from Greece to the borders of India. Subjects in remote lands might never see the emperor's face, but holding a coin stamped with his image signified their submission to the empire. As the Roman Empire reached the pinnacle of power, they perfected metallic currency on an unprecedented scale. The silver denarius and gold aureus of Rome dominated the Western world. Roman roads were built not only for marching legions, but for streams of coins to circulate. Yet it was during this era that another dark, mysterious side of money emerged: inflation and the erosion of trust. When faced with financial crises or military payroll demands, Roman emperors resorted to a deceitful trick. They recalled pure silver coins, melted them down, mixed in copper or iron, and reminted them. The silver content in each denarius steadily declined over time. Under Emperor Nero, a denarius contained about 90% silver, but by the 3rd century CE, the silver content plummeted to less than 5%. The populace was not foolish. They recognized the deception, hoarded old pure silver coins, and offloaded the new debased currency. Trust collapsed, prices skyrocketed, and the currency lost its value entirely. This was one of the hidden, profound factors behind the collapse of one of history's greatest empires. While the West sank into the Dark Ages following the fall of Rome, on the other side of the Eurasian continent, another civilization was quietly preparing for money's next giant leap. That civilization was China. Tracing back to the Qin dynasty, after unifying China in 221 BCE, Qin Shi Huang executed a bold step, unifying currency across the land by issuing the Banliang coin. This bronze coin was round, with a square hole in the middle. The circle symbolized heaven, and the square hole represented earth. The square hole was not only philosophically symbolic, but also highly practical. People could string hundreds or thousands of coins together on a cord for easy transport. However, the economic boom during the Tang and Song dynasties presented a new dilemma. Commerce grew to such a scale that massive quantities of currency were required to trade silk, tea, and ceramics. Imagine being a 10th century merchant wanting to buy a large shipment of goods. You would need several carts hauled by animals just to transport hundreds of pounds of bronze coins. This weight slowed merchants down and attracted bandits along trade routes. In the face of this deadlock, in the fertile land of Sichuan during the Song dynasty, the most miraculous leap in monetary history emerged: paper money. Initially, paper money was not issued by the state. It originated from the ingenuity of private merchants. They established jiaozi shops, an early form of pawn shop or primitive bank. Merchants deposited their heavy bronze coins at the shop, receiving a paper certificate called jiaozi. This slip clearly stated the amount of bronze coins stored, bearing complex signatures and seals to prevent counterfeiting. When conducting transactions, instead of hauling hundreds of pounds of bronze coins, merchants simply handed over the jiaozi paper. The seller could redeem the paper for bronze coins at the shop any time, or simply use it to buy goods from someone else. Recognizing the immense potential and magic of these thin slips of paper, the Song government in 1024 revoked private printing rights and officially issued the first state-backed paper currency in human history. Paper money was born. When Italian traveler Marco Polo arrived in China in the 13th century, during Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty, he was completely astounded by this phenomenon. In his memoirs, Marco Polo dedicated a whole chapter to describing his amazement. He recounted that the great Khan made currency from the bark of mulberry trees. These dark gray slips of paper, stamped with the king's red seal, held the same value as pure gold or silver ingots. Marco Polo wrote, "The great Khan can buy all the treasures in the world without spending a single coin of gold or silver, merely using these worthless slips of paper printed at his command." To Europeans at the time, whose currency remained strictly tied to the weight of gold and silver, this seemed like black magic or a grand illusion. Centuries passed before Europe caught up with China in adopting paper money. But when Europe embraced paper currency, they combined it with modern banking systems, triggering a financial explosion that reshaped global power dynamics. Initially, European paper bills were known as banknotes, operating under the gold standard. Every paper note issued was guaranteed to be redeemable for an equivalent amount of gold or silver stored in a central bank's vaults. The paper bill remained merely a proxy. a claim ticket for physical gold. Yet the mysterious game of money did not stop there. The story reached an extraordinary climax on August 15, 1971. In a televised broadcast that shocked the world, U.S. President Richard Nixon unilaterally ended the direct convertibility of the U.S. dollar to gold. This decision, known in history as the Nixon shock, severed the final link between currency and natural precious metals. From that moment on, the world entered the era of fiat money, currency created out of thin air, unbacked by gold, silver, or any physical asset. It exists and holds value solely because the government declares it valuable, and the public accepts that belief. The essence of money completed a full historical loop. From invisible trust among prehistoric hunter-gatherers, through millennia bound to clay, shells, gold, and silver, and finally back to a pure concept of belief. Looking back today over that immense historical journey, we realize a truth both mysterious and astounding. Money is not a physical invention like fire, the wheel, or the steam engine. Money is a technology of thought, a collective psychological structure. A polymer banknote or a digital balance on your banking app holds no intrinsic value. If a global catastrophe struck and civilization collapsed, a gold bar or a stack of polymer bills would not satisfy your hunger as much as a sweet potato or a bottle of clean water. Money functions only when billions of strangers who do not know each other agree to participate in a shared imagined reality. We believe that piece of paper has value because we believe others believe it too. Today, as we walk through modern cities glowing with neon lights, money is changing shape once more. The metallic coins stamped with Lydian lions, the mulberry bark paper notes of Kublai Khan's era, are fading away to make room for binary streams of ones and zeros running across cloud networks. We swipe cards, tap phones, transfer funds via QR codes, and trade in computer-encrypted cryptocurrencies. Money is becoming more invisible than ever, returning to its original nature, a vast accounting network storing information on human contribution and debt within society. So, when did humans begin using money? The answer does not lie at a fixed point in time. Not the moment someone picked up the first cowrie shell, or when a Lydian king stamped a lion seal onto gold. Humans began using money at the exact moment our brains evolved enough to transcend physical reality, to believe in an abstract concept, a promise, and a stranger. Money was born when humans learned to share collective dreams. And as long as trust between human beings endures, the mysterious story of money will continue to unfold new chapters, guiding humanity into future realms we can barely begin to imagine.